Welcome back. So I want to talk about more of the fantasy hockey stuff. So this morning I talked about your players who have improved each year for the last 3 years. Now, I did leave out Connor McDavid because he's in this video, right? Point per game, guys. And I didn't want to double up players. I don't want to do the same players over and over again. So I had two different columns. Your point per game guys who are reliable for a point per game. And I defined that as anybody who gets 0.89 points per game or higher. And I then had the rising as well. And I think the rising is more for maybe there's some guys in there that you normally wouldn't think of taking in your fantasy, and maybe you should. So there's 23 players that met my criteria of each year for the last 3 years. They've scored a minimum of 0.89 points per game. And there was honorable mentions. I'm going to explain why. There's two honorable mentions in here. First off is Kucherov, who didn't play in the regular season last year. He didn't. So I can't say, well, Kucherov will guarantee would have had at least a point per game. He likely would have, but we don't know for sure. So he gets an honorable mention because he didn't actually play in the regular season. The other honorable mention I'm going to give to Jack Eichel because he had an injury-riddled season. If he's back to being Jack Eichel this year at some level, if that happens, this whole injury neck thing gets resolved and he can play, he absolutely is a guy who would show up on this board. But this past season, he didn't get 0.89 points per game. And again, so he gets the honorable mention because he doesn't qualify to be on this board. But that means there's 25 players altogether. So the way that I structured this, we're going to start off with from the Washington Capitals. And I'm not using logos for this because the logos, the size of the magnets would make it so that I wouldn't have room for everything I want on the board to be on the board. And I wouldn't be able to get all 23 on here. But Backstrom, the lowest he's produced over the last 3 years is 0.89 points per game. And the best he's been is 0.96 points per game. So, is he exactly at 1.00 points per game? No, but he's reliable. That's only a variance of 0.07 points per game. Now, he is on the north side of 30, so that might be one thing you look at and say, well, his offense could start to fall off due to his age. That does happen. There are some guys on this list who we could see fall off due to age. But Backstrom, he'll likely still be playing with Ovechkin. Probably still point per game. 22nd on the list from the Toronto Maple Leafs, John Tavares. Now, Tavares ranges from 0.89 points per game to 1.07 points per game. So that's how I've structured this, is the low point here and the high point. The high point with Tavares is higher than Backstrom. The low point is the same. Tavares, again, if he's healthy after the injury he suffered in the playoffs, if he's good to go, he should be good for about a point per game. So pretty reliable. The variance there is 0.18, so it's more of a variance than you see with Backstrom, but it's a variance on the good side of things too. Number 21 from the Tampa Bay Lightning, Steven Stamkos. I'm going to do one of these on defensemen too, so before anybody wonders, yes, there will be one on defensemen as well. Stamkos varies from 0.89, which is a popular number, to 1.20. And that's part of the reason why I use 0.89 as the dividing line. I said anything below 0.89, I'll leave off of it. Because at 0.89, you get some pretty big name players who are some pretty good scorers. Stamkos from 0.89 to 1.20. Yes, he is an injury concern from season to season. There's always that potential that Tampa at some point looks at his contract and goes, we love Stamkos, but we need to save cap money, and maybe he ends up being a trade target. But at this point, there hasn't been credible reports that Tampa's even looking at that. So Stamkos should be reliable for about a point per game this year. Number 20 from the Boston Bruins. Not the end of the Boston Bruins on this list either. It's Patrice Bergeron, who also, the low point, 0.89 over the last 3 years. The high point, 1.22. So the variance is higher for Bergeron, but so is the reward. So your minimum is low, but your maximum is pretty good at 1.22. And Bergeron, again, on that line, I'm not calling it that, on that line, he absolutely should be good for a point per game. The question mark with Bergeron is his age as well and health. Can he stay healthy for a full season? And are we going to reach a point where his point totals start to drop because of his age? That is a legit question. Number 19. Player that I like. And he's on this list now, and that's Zibanejad. For Zibanejad at 19, he actually has .89 as his low point as well. So if I had said, no, .9 is the dividing line, none of them would be on this board. His high point, 1.32. So, yeah, Zibanejad, not a fantastic season this past year. We know COVID hit him pretty hard. If he's back to full health and he feels good, he may very well get back up to that 1.3. He could get into that range. Really an underrated center, I think, by some. And again, if you're doing fantasy, in fact, I looked at this when it was all done, and I was like, you know what? For fantasy ratings, it's not bad. This isn't bad for a top 23. Number 18. This one, though, I do wonder if he's going to be able to do it again. Going to the Jets, Blake Wheeler. Wheeler's low point is .92. His high point is 1.11. Wheeler is a good points producer. We know that the advanced stats crowd don't like his stats in that range, but if you are in a fantasy league that talks about points, and that's really the key thing, Wheeler's very reliable. But at this stage in his career, will he see his ice time get cut back? Will that point total that he's had over the last 3 years, will that become an almost impossibility if they decide to advance other forwards into the spot he's occupied for years? So Wheeler, there's more risk, I would think, with Wheeler than some of the other guys on the board. Number 17. Technically tied for 16. Technically. But Jake Guentzel, I think, will be okay with me putting his name on the board first. His low point, .93. High point, 1.10. Now, the question with Guentzel is, so is he legitimately good on his own? Is this a sign of how good Crosby or Malkin have been with him? I think there's a little bit of both of those, but Guentzel's a pretty good goal scorer, pretty good point producer, and I don't think he relies on anybody else to get those goals and points. Yeah, it's nice to have good line mates. That does help, but Guentzel's a legit star in his own right. So .93 to 1.10, I think it's pretty safe bet that Guentzel should be around that again, unless Pittsburgh has some major trouble this year. 16, and it's the exact same number. This is why I like doing this kind of thing, because it's the exact same number. Ovechkin. Ovechkin has the exact same totals, but I had to put Ovechkin ahead of Guentzel because it's Ovi. And if your fantasy values goals more than points, then Ovechkin definitely rates higher than Guentzel. But if you ask me right now, you said, which player do you think is going to get more points this year between Guentzel and Ovechkin? I think this year I would lean towards Guentzel just a little bit. But Ovechkin, for goals, he's going to be top 10. You have to think he's going to still be top 10 in the league, right? At least top 10, maybe even top 5. Maybe even a Rocket Richard winner, because it's Alex Ovechkin, right? Number 15. Going to the Panthers for this one. And that's Sasha Barkov. Barkov, his low point is .94. His high point's 1.17. And he does seem to be getting better every year. At some point, he'll reach that plateau, and this will be that's his standard. But Barkov is a sensational talent. And now that Florida's become a better team, now people are taking more notice of how good Barkov really is. Number 14. Going to Vegas. So we've got a Vegas player on this board too, because of course we do. Because it's Vegas. Vegas scores points. Stone. Varies from .95 to 1.11. Stone seems to be very comfortable in Vegas. I think it's a pretty safe bet that Stone's going to produce again this year. The variance here too, from .95 to 1.11, that's good. That's a healthy .16 variance. That's not bad. Pretty reliable right there. Almost Scheifele levels of reliability. Number 13. This is as consistent as you're going to get as well. Sebastian Aho from .97 to 1.02. Now, despite that variance being the smallest on the board, and I don't think there's anybody else. Nope, there's one. There's one that's got a smaller variance than Aho on this side of the board. Honestly, I think Aho's ready to blow up offensively. I think there's going to be a season where he hits like the 1.3 range. Because, again, you look at his totals at the end of the year, and he looks really good. And you still, if you watch Carolina, you know he can score more. There's more there, which is not an insult to his effort or anything like that. You just know that his best days are ahead of him. So, very reliable scorer, very solid, reliable point totals from Aho in terms of points per game. Number 12, from Colorado, Mikko Rantanen. So for Rantanen, bit more of a variance here from 0.98 to 1.27. So the variance there is 0.29. So it's a high number, but still, you're starting out at that high number. This is why I structured it the way I did, where the guy with the lowest number being higher ends up being higher on this overall chart. Because that's what you should be looking at, is the player that you know what you're going to get from him. And again, you want to look at health. Rantanen, can he stay healthy for the full season? There are some injury concerns on the board. Rantanen may very well be one of them. Number 11. Going back to the Bruins on this one. I mean, I could have worn a Bruins jersey for this, but I didn't. Pastrnak, who varies from 1.00, so now we're into guys who don't go below a point per game over the last 3 years, to 1.36. Very reliable player. And, much like Ovechkin, you're going to get your goals with Pastrnak. You're going to get a lot of goals with Pastrnak. And even when he's up and down, and you're like, well, he's had a good week here, he's had an iffy week there, and at the end you look at it and you go, man, he's still got really good totals. And much like Aho here, there are times with Pasta where you're like, I think there's more there. Pastrnak at some point in his career probably will have a 60-goal season. 100 points is going to happen at some stage. Maybe 110. He can get hot for long periods, and I think he's got the capability for that. But, yeah, he's very reliable, just outside the top 10. So your top 10 starts with one of the most reliable scorers, Mark Scheifele. And with Scheifele, he's suspended for the first game of the season, but after that, he's back. And he's very reliable. 1.02 to 1.13 is where he slots in. So as I've mentioned in video after video, when I do the fantasy rankings every year and I talk about who you're going to be able to guarantee you get the right amount of points from, Scheifele is always one of the most reliable scorers. Just very, very reliable. There was a post I saw last year from somebody saying, well, I think Scheifele's going to fall off the map scoring-wise, and I thought, no. Scheifele's still young enough that I think you can basically set your watch by his production. This is very, very reliable player. I don't think there's much danger there. And I understand that the suspension in the first game of the season, he doesn't miss games either. So, Scheifele, very reliable. Number 9. Going to Toronto on this one. Could have worn a Toronto jersey for this too, because there's a number of Toronto Maple Leafs on this. So Austin Matthews, from 1.07 to 1.27. And again, if you're in a fantasy league that values goals, Matthews probably going to win the Rocket Richard Award this year. I would think. I'd kind of be surprised if he doesn't. And that's not taking anything away from Pasta or Ovechkin or McDavid or Draisaitl, but Matthews, I think he has it in him to win multiple Rocket Richard trophies. And again, he's above a point per game. Pretty healthy above a point per game. That shouldn't change this year. No matter what happens with Toronto, Matthews' production should still be really reliable. 8th, this is the most baffling. I even double-checked this one. I went back into the book, and I'm like, is that it? Jonathan Huberdeau. The variance is almost nothing. 1.11 points per game to 1.13 points per game. Over the last 3 years, he is absolutely the most reliable of the point per game scorers. You should get, with Huberdeau, 1.11 points per game, maybe 1.13. It should be that reliable from Huberdeau. That's remarkable. That's elite level. He is a fantastic scorer. And with Barkov, you get the higher total here of 1.17. But with Huberdeau, the floor is 1.11. With Barkov, it's 0.94. So that's why I built this the way that I did. Number 7. It's weird to see this guy at 7, but At this point in time, Sidney Crosby is still Sidney Crosby. From 1.13 to 1.27. Very reliable scorer. Should still be point a game this year, minimum. It just feels like he defies aging. I don't think I'm going to get older. I don't think I've decided not to. He looks the same. He skates the same. Everything just feels like it's the same with Crosby. And his scoring is nothing short of remarkable. That he's ahead of so many really good young players. He's still amongst the elite is fantastic. Number 6. Going back to Toronto for this one. Now, I know people complain about Marner and the playoffs and Marner. I've heard it a lot. But Marner during the regular season, very, very reliable. 1.14 to 1.22. So your variance there is only 0.08. That's solid. Over a 3-year period, Marner has shown he can score at the NHL level. I know people will say playoffs. This is just for regular season. Playoffs don't come into this right now. If you're looking at building a fantasy team and you go, I think Marner's overrated, this number would tell you no. Again, if you're in a league that values points, if you're in a league that values goals, Matthews will give you more value than Marner. But if it's just pure points, Marner's the guy to go with. Number 5, Patrick Kane. Patrick Kane is still a remarkable talent as well. 1.18 to 1.36. So your low end here for Kane at 1.18 is better than a lot of other high points that other guys get to. Kane has set the bar really, really high for himself. Last season was really excellent for him. I would expect that he and DeBrincat on a line again this year. That could be an absolutely remarkable duo yet again. And that should get Kane back into at least 1.2 points per game or higher. Absolutely gaudy numbers put up by Patrick Kane. Another player who just doesn't seem to be getting older. Number 4, going to Colorado. For Nathan MacKinnon. Nathan MacKinnon's numbers vary from 1.21 to 1.35. So again, for MacKinnon, I've seen the complaints about, Colorado in the playoffs. None of that's on MacKinnon. You look at McKinnon's production in the playoffs, it's fantastic. They need more depth. They need more of the scoring from the depth guys, and they need that defense to be better. It's not on MacKinnon. MacKinnon's low point of 1.21, the high point of 1.35, he is really come into his own. It's not that, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago anyways. We were talking about MacKinnon as the number 1 draft pick, and it really hasn't worked out that well, and I don't know. And now he's a superstar. So Nathan MacKinnon. Number 3, going back to Boston. What always surprises me with Brad Marchand. Brad Marchand's production is at an elite level. The low point is 1.34. The high point is 1.24. The high point's 1.30. Marchand's antics from the past overshadow a lot of what he does. But in reality, Marchand has become one of the best complete all-around players. Shorthanded, he's fantastic. Defensively, he is definitely capable of holding his own. And the points are there. It is unusual for a winger to get Selke votes, but I think you could make an argument that yes, when it comes to the Selke, that's been Bergeron's territory. Marchand is right there defensively with Bergeron. And so this offense from a guy who's also really good defensively, and some of the antics that we've all not enjoyed so much throughout his career, a lot of that has sort of diminished over the last couple of seasons. I know there's still stuff there. I know there is. But he's gotten better. And yeah, the production level is just great. And there could be a point in time where Marchand's passed 1,000 points in his career, and we start to have that discussion about, so Hall of Fame then? And then that'll be a nice, lively, and I'm sure completely civil discussion. Yeah, that's my prediction. Number 2. Now we're going to Edmonton. And there's the big 2 in Edmonton. Leon Draisaitl, whose low point, 1.28. And the high point, of course, not this past season, but the year before, where he scores 1.55 points per game. So, that 1.55 is higher than everybody else on the board to this point. The 1.28, that is higher than most of the high points that we see from the rest of these guys. Draisaitl absolutely goes early in any fantasy draft, and rightfully so. Whether he's on McDavid's line or not, he will produce. So if they end up in a situation where Draisaitl has to play on the same line as McDavid, he'll produce. If he's on his own line, he'll produce. Very, very reliable. Number one, the least surprising number one on any video I've ever done, and that's Connor McDavid. Connor McDavid, the low point, 1.49. That's the worst points per game he's had in the last 3 seasons. And the high point, 1.88. And at some point, I'm going to guess he eclipses 2. At some point, I think he eclipses 2 points per game. I'd be kind of surprised if he doesn't. Because, again, McDavid, it just feels like he scores at will. The rest of the league is just sort of his playground, and he scores at will, and he makes everybody else look amateurish by comparison. And he had an absolutely sensational season. Being able to pass 100 points in a season of 56 games is nothing short of remarkable. And McDavid is one of the best in the game, if not the best in the game. I think he's the best in the game, but I understand that there are other people that use other criteria, and there is still the argument to be made for Sidney Crosby. Absolutely. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through and just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.